You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're listening to Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Locked On Mets is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. On the show today, we're going to talk about another brutal loss for the New York Mets and how their playoff hopes are now hanging by a thread. I'll talk about the game in the first segment. Second segment, I'll talk about where the race is now. Final segment, I'll talk about what's left of this playoff race. Before we get to any of that, though, I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. It's the only podcast that covers the Mets 7 days a week throughout the regular season. If you want to find some of my written work, you do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the editor-in-chief. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the FanDuel app today. Well, the New York Mets had a chance to at least win a series against the Nationals, a series that going into the weekend we were calling a must-sweep series. Now, on Saturday, they let one slip through their fingers, and on Sunday, they played scared. That's the only way to describe it. The New York Mets, who grabbed momentum a week earlier when Pete Alonso hit that huge walk-off homer that made you think that maybe, just maybe, this team could string together 2 weeks of half solid baseball to just get in a race that is going to have a playoff team who probably only gets to 85 wins. The Mets were supposed to be at least the team that could separate themselves from the pack. And yet, they let the Washington Nationals come to their house on a year where the Mets set a record for Citi Field attendance. Never have Mets fans showed up for this ball club more than this season. With the signing of Juan Soto and riding the momentum, or what we thought was going to be some momentum from 2024, Mets fans showed up. And they were let down. There's no other way to describe it. You had two pitchers for the Washington Nationals, and Jake Irvin and Mitchell Parker, who are both sitting with ERAs well above 5.5 after they went 9 innings and gave up just 2 runs against this Mets lineup. Jake Irvin goes 5 1/3, 6 hits, 2 walks, 5 strikeouts. Just gave up the 2 runs, and Mitchell Parker came in after that and got the final 11 outs. Giving up just 2 hits, no walks, and nothing came across. Mitchell Parker has been brutal this season, as has Jake Irvin. And the Mets could do nothing. And Sean Manaea, once again, has a bad start. Really, it was a bad inning. The second inning was brutal for Manaea. First, he gives up a leadoff single to new Mets killer Dalen Lyle. Then, after getting it out, he gives up a double to Jorge Alfaro. Francisco Lindor's flow to throw to second base, not caught by Jeff McNeil, ruled an error on Lindor, and that allows Lyle to go from third base and just score on the errant throw. 1-0 Nats. After a ground out, here comes Nasim Nunez, slender shortstop for the Nationals. Don't think he has too much pop. I guess we're wrong. Big home run for the Nats. 3-0. Mets have to try to come back now for the rest of the game, and this team just incapable of doing so. Sean Manaea would have a good third inning. Went out for the fourth, faced one batter, error by Pete Alonso, and then after you got through those tough lefties, because we all know, Robert Hassel, really tough, and that was the whole reason, right, that the Mets wanted to put Sean Manaea at the beginning of the game because of all the tough lefties at the top of that lineup for the Nationals. Well, it wasn't really Robert Hassel that he was in the game for. It must have been for Dalen Lyle, right? Because the guy had an unbelievable series. That he's one of those big lefties you had to fear. Him, James Wood, Josh Bell, switch hitter, Lyle, C.J. Abrams, who didn't even play in this game. I'm only mentioning all this because the Mets' rationale behind starting Sean Manaea instead of Clay Holmes, when the Clay Holmes as the opener part of a piggyback had worked so well the last time out that let's change it up. Because we really got to prepare for James Wood, who has been awful since the All-Star game. So he can't possibly stick with what worked. And regardless, so then, you decide to go with Manaea. He puts you in a 3-0 hole. You go to Clay Holmes, and Clay Holmes was really good. Clay Holmes got 11 outs himself, gave up 4 hits, 3 strikeouts, got the Mets into the late innings, but they could just never score enough. They score 1 run in the 3rd inning on a broken, weird play where after Luis Torrens had doubled, Cedric Mullins hits a pop-up down the left field line, and Dalen Lyle goes to make a sliding catch, and he crashes into the sidewall there, foul territory, and is unable to come up with it. Luis Torrens, heads up, running the whole way, comes around to score. Cedric Mullins watched, was a bystander, got tagged out at second base, but because the play was ruled dead on the field, they returned into first. But that was, after the play was ruled dead. I mean, if Cedric Mullins was just running the whole time, he probably could have got to third base. But you got to watch, make sure the guy's okay. I understand the sportsmanship. But Cedric Mullins just has been a brutal addition for the New York Mets. Brutal. That was his 1 hit in the game. He struck out 2 times. Should have been 0 for 4. So, that's still to me just Cedric Mullins' play in this series, between the way he misplayed the inside the park homer, the fact that he didn't show the desperation of, you saw Luis Torrens, the way he was scampering around the bases, regardless of the guy who had an ugly collision with the wall. The play's not ruled dead. So keep on playing. What happens after that, just because it's the Mets, Francisco Lindor hits a line drive that Josh Bell makes a leap and catch on, and it becomes an immediate double play. What happens after that? Juan Soto doubles. So you just think about that inning. If Cedric Mullins was even standing on second base, just second, instead of first, that's a run the New York Mets could have scored. In a game where you lose by a run, that's one. And then, I don't even think it's worth doing the play-by-play for the rest of the game, but there's 2 other plays to discuss before we wrap on discussing. I guess that was a Freudian slip. I was trying to say discussing this game, and I said disgusting a couple times because, if the word fits, right? The 2 plays, both made by Jacob Young, make you think that this team has no shot. And that's because there's just no world where it makes sense, the catch that Jacob Young made to start off the 5th inning. Brett Beatty hits a bullet center field. Jacob Young, who is one of the best defensive center fielders in baseball, is running back. He jumps up, sort of twists his body backwards a little bit to try to make this leaping catch. I don't think the ball would have gone out, but it should hit off the top of the wall and been a leadoff double for Beatty. Young gets glove on it, crashes into the wall. Somehow the ball that was at the tip of his glove, the top of the glove, never touches the wall. And instead, as it pops out, starts falling down to the earth, and somehow, some way, not because of Jacob Young's skill, not because of anything the Nationals could have done, because the Mets seem to be cursed. Somehow that ball drops perfectly on his foot, that he is able to kick it straight up in the air, not kick it into the wall, not kick it off the side of his foot to go either way, but it somehow hits perfectly off his foot and bounces right up and falls like it was placed into his glove by angels in the outfield, right into Jacob Young's glove for a fly out. A play that makes no conceivable sense. And then you have the 9th inning. This one, you got to give Jacob Young credit. He makes a heck of a play going back on a ball. And yes, I guess you could say it was a heck of a play to kick save. a fly ball and catch it, but to me that was just dumb luck. What we saw in the ninth inning was just skill as Jacob Young sprints back on a line drive off the bat of Francisco Alvarez that would have tied the game because it was going to clear the wall. And he jumps up and robs it and brings it back in. It was as frustrating of a series as you can imagine. Francisco Lindor hits a home run in the sixth inning to bring you close. And that would be it. You would never score another run again at Citi Field in 2025. Unless this team does the unthinkable down the stretch and actually finds a way to go for a run. But how can you possibly believe that's going to happen right now? You just can't. And so it feels like the season's over, but I want to talk about the rest of the race and where things are really at. So we're going to go through all of that here in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by Nutrafol. You've probably seen a million ads for hair growth products and thought, sure, like that actually works. There are so many products out there, it's hard to know which ones are actually going to do anything. That's why you should give Nutrafol a closer look. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist-recommended hair growth supplement brand that is trusted by over 1.5 million people. And it's not just hype. This is a supplement that's been clinically tested that targets the root causes of thinning and shedding with a proactive approach. What are those root causes? And Mets fans, it's the Mets. No, I'm just messing around by that part. But whether you're at work, out with friends, or even just getting ready in the morning, Nutrafol gives you more confidence in your daily routine. You can feel good about knowing that Nutrafol is NSF certified and backed by peer-reviewed studies. See thicker, stronger hair with less shedding in just 3 to 6 months with Nutrafol. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering Locked On MLB listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com and enter the promo code LOCKEDONMLB. That's Nutrafol.com, promo code LOCKEDONMLB. If you're watching on YouTube today, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 15,000 subscribers. I'd love to get there by the end of the season, and we are running out of time. I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. Going into the final week of the season, the New York Mets are technically right now on the outside looking in when it comes to the playoff picture. They have slipped to even with the Reds in the standings after the Reds swept the Cubs in a 4-game set. Thanks a lot, Chicago. And now the Mets are sitting at 80-76 with 6 left to play. And they can win every single game. And if the Reds sweep their final week of the season, they're in, and the Mets are out via tiebreaker. You also have the Diamondbacks, who are only a game back of the Mets, and they too have the tiebreaker. The Diamondbacks over the weekend, they beat the Phillies. The Reds over the weekend, like I mentioned, they swept the Cubs in a 4-gamer. The Mets lose 2 of 3 to the Washington Nationals. Mind you, the Giants even won on Sunday. The Marlins won. The Cardinals won. The Braves won. I mean, everybody in the National League basically won except for the Mets and the Cubs. Literally. Everybody. Even the Rockies managed to win on Sunday. And now, this Mets team, who has been terrible on the road all year, they're 31-44 on the road. Now you got to believe that they're going to go into Chicago and beat the same Cubs team that, yes, looked awful over the weekend. Lost 2 games 1-0 to the Reds. 1-0, 2 games. This vaunted Cubs lineup, who has scored more runs than any team in the National League other than the Arizona Diamondbacks. The highest scoring offense in the National League, managed to score nothing in 2 of 4 games to the Reds. Now, one of them, Hunter Green, pitched a gem. But who was the guy who pitched on Sunday? I think it was, was it Zach Littell that pitched that one? Really doesn't matter. This is now getting to the point where you can call it one of the biggest collapses in Mets history. But it wasn't really just a straight collapse at the end. This wasn't 2007, no matter how many people will tell you that it was. This was much different. This was if it ends up being a collapse, and it already sort of is, but if the Mets don't make the playoffs, when you had the best record in baseball until Kodai Senga leaped in the air for that throw by Pete Alonso and messed up his hamstring and then turned into a shell of himself. That team was the best in baseball. This team has been right there as one of the worst in baseball since the middle of June. So it's not just, the Mets were up by 7 with 17 left, whatever. No. This is the Mets month after month after month after. They just play bad baseball. It's just not a good team. And there's no defending the other side of it. There's no, as much as I've been one to defend the other side of it. This has just not been the Mets' year. And now you look at the road ahead. Going to Chicago, try to do something against the Cubs. And hey, even if you do, final series of the season, you're going to play a Marlins team that, by the way, is only 4 games back of you right now. There's every chance that the Marlins can still finish better than the Mets this year. Every chance. They're going to play the Phillies in Philadelphia, and the Phillies still have home field to play for, if that means anything. They're not going to fold against the Marlins. You know, they still have another series to play after this. They're still setting themselves up for the postseason. They're going to try to win those games, but who knows what happens there. The Marlins are 4 games under 500. The Mets are 4 games over. That's it. The most wins the Mets can have this year is 86. But going into that final weekend, the Marlins are going to play like it's their World Series, 100%. They are going to give everything, just like the Nationals did. Because when you have your division rival in front of you, and you have a chance to play games that matter, not for you, but for them, there's nothing more dangerous than that type of a team. And I think that played out when you look at this series the Reds got against the Cubs. Where the Cubs, they're sitting at 88 wins. The Padres are 3 games back and technically could grab home field in this final week. That could still happen. So if you think the Cubs don't have anything to play for this week, you're wrong. They can't let this slide continue because they got to make sure that wild card round is played at Wrigley Field. They have to. Be the first time they've had fans at Wrigley for a playoff game since 2018. So they're going to be going for it in these games. But over the weekend in Cincinnati, you know that you're probably going to lock it up with another few wins. There's just not the same fight that you're going to get from a Nationals team that has nothing to lose. And you saw those guys playing their hearts out. Dalen Lyle, he had an unbelievable series. Jacob Young, Josh Bell. But the Mets are a better team, or they're supposed to be. They're supposed to be able to rise up above it. And they couldn't do it. And now you got the Diamondbacks on your heels, a game back with the tiebreaker, and the Reds are even with you with the tiebreaker. You got 2 teams that can end your season this week. So the Mets, all they can do at this point is win. That's it. But can we really buy into this Mets team actually pulling it off and somehow ending up in the playoffs? I'm going to talk about that to close the show here in just a minute. First, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season's here, and FanDuel's making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet. Player props, building a same-game parlay, even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It's quick, it's easy, it's the best way to add a little more energy to your Sundays. So if you're ready to play, just go to FanDuel, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. And if that bet wins, again, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. If you're an everydayer that always tunes into the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. It's our texting service. We're getting updates from me anytime news breaks with the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. Take part in our Locked On Mets signed photo giveaways. And the live graphics sent to your phone each day so you know who's in the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Now, can the Mets pull this off and still end up in the playoffs? For those of you that have given up on the season, it was a bad weekend of baseball. I really don't blame you. But there is still baseball left to play. This team is still far from eliminated going into their final week of the season. Now, it can get dicey real quick. It already is. And you're looking at the Reds, who get to stay home and are now hosting the Pirates, and you're probably thinking, what are the chances that they actually lose a game to that horrible Pirates team? Well, it's the exact same thing as what just happened with the 64-92 Washington Nationals. Ugh. Looking at the standings, it's just brutal. The Pirates are actually a better team this year. They're 67-89. They're going to play their best possible game, or they're going to try to. There's something to play for Pittsburgh going into their division rival's house with a chance to upset the apple cart. And there's also something to be said about being in position instead of being the chaser. Okay, the Reds, it's their race now. And there's pressure that comes with that. The Giants got real close to the New York Mets. Real close. There was a moment where the Giants were even with the Mets before they played their game last week, where they had gotten right there after a memorable walk-off grand slam. It looked like the Giants were the team of destiny in the horrible NL wildcard race. And then they blew it. And they had a horrible week of baseball, and they just fell out of the race, basically. So don't just count the Reds for winning the rest of their games and think that they're going to pull this thing off. Yes, they've won 5 in a row. A great run for them. They sweep a 4-game series against the Cubs. I still can't believe that happened. But you don't know how these games are going to play out. You just don't. No one had the Astros at home getting swept by the Mariners over the weekend. But now the Astros are potentially going to fall out of the playoffs. Depends on who's going to crash out more, them or the Tigers, who are going through a horrible stretch. And now all of a sudden, you look at the Cleveland Guardians, who were nowhere near this race a couple of weeks ago, and not only do they have a great chance to make the playoffs because they are actually right now in position tied with the Astros and a game back of the Red Sox, but they're also a game back of Detroit at home about to play the Tigers again. So they have a chance, if they win tomorrow, to end up leading a division that they've never led all season. Unless something happened early in the year. Because the Tigers have basically led that division wire to wire. But they've lost 6 in a row. They're collapsing worse than the Mets are. So there's no way to predict baseball games. You have no idea what's going to happen. For all we know, the Reds get swept by the Pirates this week. And it might seem like that's impossible. But that could happen. You really just don't know. All the Mets can do is focus on winning Tuesday night. And then you win Wednesday night. And then you win Thursday night and you figure it out. But it was laughable to hear Sean Manaea. And I get it. That's what you got to say in that clubhouse. But to hear Sean Manaea after the game, if any team can do it, it's us. Now, if any team can do it, it's the 2024 Mets, not the 2025 Mets. The 2025 Mets have not been the same team that they were last year. They're the team that would routinely rally back late in games and pull off huge, emotionally charged comebacks. The team this year gets so close to that comeback as the bases loaded with 1 out and Brandon Nimmo strikes out in the other batter's box, swinging at a pitching in the other batter's box. The team that has a center fielder make a circus catch against him where he somehow kick saves a ball that would have been a triple probably with all the stuff that was going on it, and it turns into an out. But if anybody can do it, it's the Mets, according to Sean Manaea. That is the mindset they have to have. They have to get really boxed out from the world, boxed out from all of the Mets fans that are losing their minds right now. The analysts who are crushing this team, especially the ones in the national media who are laughing at the Mets. How did they possibly leave this door cracked so open that the Reds have been able to, with a good week, storm in and take their playoff spot after holding it since April 5th? They need to wall off the outside world and find something within in themselves and each other to go into Chicago and win some baseball games. But this race could look a lot different if the Reds lose a series to the Pirates and the Mets beat the Cubs. All of a sudden, everything flips. Mets are right back in the driver's seat. And then they got to go into Miami and try to hold off a Marlins team that's going to fight tooth and nail to keep them out of the playoffs. It's probably going to end in heartbreak. But there's still a week left of baseball to be played. And as much as you probably hate the 2025 New York Mets, as much as every single Carlos Mendoza post-game presser where he talks about the talent in that room and we're one pitch away, as much as that probably drives you up a wall, as much as you're really frustrated every single time you watch Mark Vientos strike out on a check swing or see Pete Alonso make an errant throw to first base, all of these things that are driving you up the wall. And yet, for those of you who are tuning into the show every day, the Mets fans who love to hate the Mets, but get incredible joy when things actually work out, we still only have a week left of baseball, and you're going to miss it when they're gone. No matter how bad this team is and how much you are feeling it right now. 3 weeks from now, if this season's over and other teams are in the playoffs, you're not going to think good riddance. You're going to think, man, it's a long wait until pitchers and catchers report in February of 2026. Long wait. So let's enjoy what we can of this season, and hopefully the Mets go out with a little bit of a fight. That's all you can hope for. It's a little bit of a fight. I appreciate all of you who tuned in throughout these shows over the weekend. This is my last little trip here before the end of this season. So I'll be back in studio doing my show on video and everything throughout the rest of this week, covering all of it. I will be going to Miami to watch some of those games at the end of the week. So I'll get to have the Mets break my heart in person, or maybe I'll get to cheer for something exciting. Because the funny thing about the playoff format is all these teams can hang in forever. And then once you get into the playoffs, all the records drop. But for now, this Mets team is holding on by a thread. We'll see how it all finishes. Appreciate all of you again for tuning in. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. If you want to be Locked On Mets Insider, find a link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen, your first watch every day. Now, for your second watch, check out Locked On MLB Game Night, the show that'll take you around all the action of Major League Baseball with insight from our local experts and league-wide experts. They'll take you through all the games. You can find Locked On MLB Game Night on the Locked On MLB YouTube channel as well as the Locked On MLB podcast feed.